Good afternoon. My name is Tom Cassidy. I'm the advisor to the Learner's Voice Initiative here at WISE. I'm also a mentor to the learners. And I'm pleased to welcome you all here to this session this afternoon, which we're calling Learner's Voice Lessons from the Field. In this session, you're going to have a special opportunity to meet 5 extraordinary young people who have spent the last year as Learner's Voice learners. These 5 young people represent 30 extraordinary young people who make up the Learner's Voice class of 2011, the second class to participate in a WISE Summit. WISE learners are quite special, as some of you probably already know, if you've been accosted by them in the hallways in the last day and a half and had the opportunity to visit with us in the learners' room. You'll know that this is a special group. And although this initiative is only 3 years old, it's already become a very competitive process to become a WISE learner. This year's cohort of 30 WISE learners were selected from 500 applications. These learners are selected on the basis of recommendations from people who know them well, who know their work ethic, who know their accomplishments, on the basis of their demonstrated talents and commitment to education already at this young age, and maybe most importantly, on the potential that they've shown for making significant contributions to education in the future. While they're young, they're between 18 and 25 years of age, many of them are already quite accomplished. Many of them have already founded, helped to found, or are planning grassroots educational organizations in their home countries, some in their communities, and even several in the neighborhoods in which they grew up. Some of these initiatives have already been recognized nationally and internationally for the innovative and collaborative approaches they've taken to meeting some of the most difficult challenges that all of us in the room have been wrestling with for years. As a group, the current and past WISE participants represent some 36 countries and a wide range of disciplines and academic interest areas. This year's 2013 class, for example, includes learners studying journalism, computer science and information systems, business management, marketing, graphic design, international studies, medicine, public policy, biology, and agronomy, as well as human ecology. Not to mention education, development, and we have several teachers in the group. The WISE initiative is still evolving. The objectives of the program are to enrich the many and varied conversations here at WISE by inviting in a voice that has all too often, in my professional life, been excluded from conversations such as this. To encourage and support the projects that these young people are working on by providing them opportunities to meet with others working on similar projects, some of us for many years, to learn from each other, and to put them in positions where we can help them meet up with people who may be able to help them take their projects forward. And lastly, and not least, to provide these young people with opportunities and experiences to really get excited about education, to realize what an exciting time this is to be in education, while it also being a very challenging time to be in education. In the hope that they will all become lifelong advocates for education, regardless of the professional path that they may take. And this year's Nobel laureate, as an example, WISE laureate, as an example, started out as a chemist. So any one of these young people could be up here someday. But we also hope that some of them will choose to become professional educators and take up the banner for years to come and will help lead education into the future. During the past year, in addition to attending the summit here in Doha, our panelists have had opportunities to travel the world, to visit some of the locations of past WISE project winners, to see firsthand what it takes to take an educational project, to build it, to sustain it, in some cases to scale it up. They've also attended a number of international summits and conferences. They've done some research on access and quality to education, and they participated in a series of online webinars where they got to discuss across the world using technology what they each were doing in their home countries and the results of the research that they had undertaken. This afternoon, what I'll do to begin is invite our panelists up here, and I'll ask them a very simple, easy question. I'll ask them to introduce themselves to you and to share a few of the highlights of their year as wise learners. And ask them also to think about what aha moments they may have had during this year, meaning moments when something became very clear to them that they hadn't understood before. After this, I'll ask them several questions that I hope will draw out of them the lessons that they've learned in the past year, in the hopes that we all will learn something from that. And then I'll ask you to participate and join us in the second half by asking them questions to fill out the program. Before I invite our panelists on stage, I've been asked to do a couple of housekeeping things. First, please silence all mobile devices that may be in your hands, on your laps, in your bags, or in your pockets. Okay? Remember the translation. The translation channels should be up on the board behind me. And these are the numbers corresponding to the various languages. And lastly, the hashtag for this session, so we can invite people who aren't present to join us, should also, I hope, be up on the board behind me. Okay? And with that, let me invite our panelists up onto the stage. Everyone good? Okay. So, it's nice to finally be up here, huh? Let me begin. I want to begin by asking each of you, in turn, to briefly introduce yourself and to share a few highlights from the year with us. And in particular, I know some of you have had some real aha moments this year. And by that, I mean moments when their understanding of something suddenly crystallized. And they had what we call, in the States anyways, an aha moment. I get it. So, Al-Jawahar, let's start with you. Okay? Introduce yourself and tell us some highlights.
Thank you, Professor Cassidy. My name is Johara Al-Thani. I'm one of the 2011 learners. I'm currently a senior at Georgetown School of Foreign Service in Qatar, studying culture and politics. And throughout the year, I had a lot of interesting experiences. One of them was being able to attend the Oxford Literacy Summit in Oxford in England. And I think throughout the year I had many small moments, small aha moments. But I think one of the things that really crystallized over the year was the importance of culture and cultural relevance in education. And I think that's the thing that really stuck out to me.
Thanks, Al-Jawahar. We hear from you.
Hi everyone, my name is Mariam Al-Kouari. I'm Qatari. I'm studying international relations as well in Qatar University. My concentration is about society and culture and heritage. Like, I'm going to graduate this year, but what I'm doing now, rather than studying, I'm working on a non-profit organization for community service. And what is the aha moment for me that being a wise voice learner and like gathering with many different people from different culture, different society, different language, for one goal or one purpose, which is collaborating for education. And this has changed my perspective and changed my thinking about education and taught my thought. This is the aha moment for me.
Thanks, Mariam. Nah, and now you have some pictures behind you.
I do.
I believe.
Hello, everybody. My name is Na Ailisa Kwenometo. I'm from Ghana, Accra. I'm in my final year studying business administration in Ashesi University College. I did have a lot of fun. I'm very happy to have been selected as part of the 2011 learners, as you can see with the pictures I've shown. So I think my highlights were discovering the education city. I'd never seen anything like that before, and I thought that was a really excellent move by the Qatar Foundation. I had so much fun leading the Learners Advocacy Workshop, and we had so many people attend. We had an interview with Sir Fazal Hassan, and we learned so much from him. I made so many friends I've kept in touch with throughout the year. We had a very exciting experience being selected to attend the E-Learning Africa conference in Benin, and I think that's where I had my aha moments when everything just became clearer. It was the conference was about ICT, and over there, I think the main highlight was identifying the main challenges that are affecting the continent, and specifically West Africa, in terms of ICT and the use of technology. It just made it clear we're just not ready, and we need to focus on other areas, which I'll talk about later on. So I'm really glad.
Thank you, Now.
Yeah, and for me, my name is Niwara Matwitama. I'm from Indonesia. I'm studying in University of Indonesia, reading international relations, but I'm currently doing my exchange year in Tokyo for a year. And aside from that, I am one of the co-founder of my organization, Indonesian Future Leaders, where we work on youth leadership and social entrepreneurship. And we are humbly honored that the beginning of this year we are recognized to be one of the awardee of MDGs Award by the Vice President for the youth organization. Among the highlights of my year-long experience with WISE is, as seen with the picture, the friendship for sure, because we are doing a lot of teamworks, and then interviewings, and then doing blogging, because we like sharing, tweeting, and Facebook. Apart from that, that is one of the picture on the right side of me about the education. It is one of the results in one of the forum in India that I was assigned to. All the participants there in my discussion group trying to define education, and sometimes we have quite different perspective how to rethink and redefine education. And one of the highlight is how one of the students saying about how the education means to be something that can bring us to the top, but the other student doesn't agree about that. But what I'm trying to say here is that we have so much different perspective about education, but what matters is how we can develop our own perspective into reality, and because learning is always the process, and we are trying to figure out, discovering what we aim to achieve in our life.
Thanks, Mohammed.
I guess I have a slide as well. Yes. My name is Mohammed Al-Jaberi. I'm originally from Yemen, and I go to school and work in France. I study physics and chemistry, preparation for chemical engineering. The highlight of being a learner since last year is to deeply understand the complexity of education. Originally being from the Middle East, the thing that we preach about when anyone asks us what do you want to reform in education, we'll say give us money, and that's it. So being in WISE just changed my perspective that in order to fix or reform complex challenges that faces education, it never can be with a simple thing. It never can be 1 + 2 = 3. It should be customized for the region that we are targeting. It should be customized for the country, the place. We cannot take education as one part without the other. We cannot provide iPods to classes with teachers that are being illy prepared. It just is not working. So I believe that is the main reason, the main highlight. During my visit to Morocco to study one of the award-winning projects, Al Jisr, or school business project, I went to classrooms and I got the chance to see how distances are different. However, some challenges that education face it's similar from a place to another.
Okay, thank you, Mohammed. So we know you're all smart. We know you've had an incredible year. I'm sure there are people sitting in the audience who are waiting for the Mature Learners Initiative to be established, so we could go to some of the places you all have been. But now I'd like to ask you about that experience and what you took away from that experience. Okay? And I'd like to begin by asking you a kind of general question. I know you did some research on access to education, and then you had all these experiences. I'd like you to think back on the experience of the year, the people you met, the places you visited, and I'd like to ask you, based on these experiences, what do you think are the biggest challenges to providing access and quality education for all learners? What, if any, conclusions did you each individually or as a group?
Okay, so we've done quite a bit of thinking around this area, and we realized that this whole issue about access and quality is multifaceted, is a multidimensional issue, and it can be tackled in one area. So we decided to come up with a framework and looked at the constraints or the barriers facing access to education, and we divided it into, so this was what group one, which was my team, we came up with 5 main areas which form the framework. So we identified organizational structural issues that stems from organizations in terms of what the government is doing, whether the CSOs doing, what are individuals doing, what are businesses doing, or what are they not doing in that respect. Economic resource issues, that has to do with a lack of infrastructure, a lack of teaching and learning materials, because all of these economic issues, when I talk about economic, we're looking at the finance aspect, the funding, the money. These, the funding, the money that limit quality or, our constraints to access to education. When we talk about human resource issues, you're looking at the teacher factor in terms of poorly trained teachers, poorly motivated teachers. These are the main fundamental human resources that contribute to a quality of education. Gordon Brown earlier on this morning said that students plus teachers equals hope, and that hope is lacking, and that's a main barrier in terms of the human resource issues. Technical issues. When I talk about when we discover the technical issues, we put the spotlight on Africa in terms of the use of technology, in terms of the use of ICT as a tool to enhance education or increase quality. That's lacking. And then social cultural issues. That is a huge problem that focuses on the girl child and also the boy child. So let me explain what I'm trying to say. So in terms of social cultural issues, there are different cultures with different belief systems. The opportunity cost of sending a girl to school versus sending her off to marriage in terms of the dowry she would get. And we had a role model today who decided to go to school and have a bigger dowry in the end. And also the opportunity cost when it comes to sending the males to school compared to taking them onto the farm. So this is the framework that we sort of came up with, and we identified these as the barriers to access and the barriers to quality of education. And to be quite honest, we haven't fully agreed as to whether or not these are the main issues, which is the biggest issue, what to tackle first, but we're still looking into it.
Okay. So to summarize, the issue is complex,
it is
multidimensional,
complex.
And I, of course, have seen the framework, so I'm not pretending not to know about it, and it's actually quite an interesting framework. And it's quite big, and these are the organizing cells in the framework.
It is.
But now I want to pursue a little bit more deeply within those cells, within those different areas. Where would you see the biggest challenges coming? Mohammed?
I personally believe that I agree with what we have worked together on the findings, those challenges in those 5 points or terms. However, coming from the Middle East, the problem or the biggest challenge that education is facing is politicization of the education. A person takes office, he starts really good plan, really strategy. 4 or 5 years, he or she leaves office, comes another one, brings a new plan. Where is the status of education? We keep going. Is it a strategic plan that actually can have an effective role in the long terms? No. Education is not a vaccination that a president or a political leader can go to one of the continents and take pictures with and say, yes, I have done something. It's a long-term development, and I'm sure most of the audience here are experts in that field, and they know more than my humble knowledge in that term. Therefore, it is a challenge. What we need is leaders that set those strategic plans for longer term goals, not just one more day. It's not happening constantly. It is for the long term.
So the challenge comes from the continuous changes of governments and leadership, and the programs that change as each new leader comes in. I think that's what you're saying.
Yes.
Okay. Mariam, for you.
Well, Professor, I believe that there is many challenges, of course, but in my perspective opinion, I think that the main challenges or the biggest challenges is the short age of the number of teachers, the number of teachers, especially in Africa and South and Western Asia. So if we look to this problem, we'll find that I'm not creating this, but according to United Nations, this year estimated that there is the world need more than 8 million teachers. 8 million teachers, imagine that. So because to replace the teacher, they were accepted to retire, or maybe they were changed their careers, or because they illness. So in South Africa, especially in sub-Saharan Africa, they face this problem. And on the other side, you will see the growth of population. And many of children, they were willing to engage to school, and they need teacher. So this is in the different part of the world. But the other side, in the Middle East, there were a teacher, but unqualified. Unfortunately, unqualified. And especially in the Middle East, you will find that the gender, the female, are more than male in teaching. So. And also, we're going to say that the teachers are young. They themselves are students, so student teaching students. So when a woman graduated from high school, they said, okay, I will not complete my study. So I will go to school and work. So how's that student teaches student? And education is something important, and we have to end this. So this is the problem.
So you're concerned about the limited experience and qualifications of new teachers?
Yes.
Okay. Nah?
In terms of sorry, what was the question again?
Specifically, you're not going to get away with just giving us the framework. What in that big maze of ideas you all had do you think is the key?
Okay, so then in terms of the key, I would go for the organizational structure. Bringing it into perspective in Ghana, you realize that the institutions don't work. When I talk about institutions, I'm referring to the institutions that run the education system in Ghana. So in terms of the Ministry of Education, in terms of the Ghana education system, there is a mismatch between what students are studying in the curriculum and what teachers are teaching. There is the whole issue of the monitoring system. Again, the institution is lacking because you cannot track whether or not teachers are coming to class in the first place because they are poorly motivated. There are really no teaching and learning materials in there. Access to education for students at primary and secondary level is very limited because there are more students coming out of primary than going into secondary. So in terms of the demand and supply, there is a gap in there. So I look at it, yes, in terms of the organizational structure, it's lacking. As long as we can strengthen the institution that runs the education system in Ghana, I think that the quality of education will greatly be improved.
Okay, so the structural column is your biggest interest. Niwa.
Okay, so in response to what Na said, I think it's pretty much, I agree to what Na said, because in Asia itself, we have very diverse educational system. And for example, in my country, Indonesia, the level of high school to the university, we can feel that the sense of educational system is quite different. In high school, we have been dealing with a few more optionals of study that we can pick, but in university, we have been dealing with a lot more liberal system. We can choose anything. And finally, there are many students that can get confused or are not adaptable with this. And this is one of the challenges for us as students to be having the problem of organizational structure. But for me, I think because I also do the research about professional development of teacher, then I come to realize that the role of teacher in educational system is profoundly important because For example, there is one research by UNESCO that telling the teacher should have 20% of its time per week to do evaluation of how the teaching and methodology of the study in the class are happening. And this is maybe lacking in my country or in some other countries in developing nation. So this might be something that we have to really think about. Not only assessment between the teachers, but also the leader of the school should also has an important role to inspire the teacher to be more experimental in modernizing the way they teach, and also trying to collaborate with us, collaborate with the student and learners, so that we can also feel engaged in the study. We can also give our inputs on how we can feel convenient with our study process.
Okay. So you covered quite a few school level issues there, right? So school level, what I summarize that as the school. What goes on in the school needs more attention. Okay, Jawa?
For me personally, I approach education through a different lens, and to me it's always been the socio-cultural issues that are related to education. So one of the things that I find interesting is the commodification of education itself, and I think the mass production of materials and shipping them out to the rest of the world is something that can be very dangerous, because it creates a sense of alienation between the students and the materials that they're reading. And I think that that's something that we need to look at from the local level. I think education is something that is a local discussion just as much as it is an international discussion. And I think that with a lot of talks recently, it's all been about sort of donating, and you're sort of working for rather than working with a lot of the developing nations, and I think that that's one of the biggest issues that we're facing. And we need to address a sort of shift in attitude, that while we have to meet international standards, we can't disregard the importance of cultural specificity. And while donating books and doing all those things are really a wonderful way to get started, why not empower people to create books and write books in their own languages, or find ways to produce resources in their own countries that are tailor-made for the people that are going to be consuming them.
Good, thank you very much. So a lot of ideas. And you said, someone early on said that you all hadn't really quite agreed to everything yet. One of you take up the question. What was the most contentious part of your discussion about this, if you recall it?
I can take that. I think that a lot of the blame is put on teachers, and I think we talk about teacher development and all those things, but people tend to forget about the discussion about how we change societal attitudes towards roles such as teaching. And I think that while we all understand that teachers play a very valuable role in society, I think many people would go home and tell their mother and father, oh, well, I've spent years at university, but now I want to go and teach. And they'd see that as a waste of their degree or a waste of their diploma. I think we see teachers as civil servants, but I always say that most people tend to leave out the civil part and just refer to them as sort of servants of society. And I think they play a much, much more important role than that. And I think that that's one of the things that I had an issue with when we talk about professional development, that it's not just about the teachers themselves, it's about society as a whole, and how do we engage all of society in sort of elevating the position of teachers, because they're the ones that are teaching the next generations, and shouldn't they be empowered as well?
And was there disagreement in the group about that? Were there others that felt that something else should be?
I don't know if there was like implicit disagreement, but I think that people simplify the issue of teacher development and teachers' involvement in schools.
Mohammed?
Actually, the debate was between who's responsible, teachers or students, or we should lay the biggest responsibility on whom. That was the question. I agree. I totally agree with Al Johara's point of view that society has a load on teachers. The way that society looks at teachers defines. If we take, for example, Finland as an example and compare it with a country from the third world countries, a teacher in Finland is highly prepared, is valued in terms of community, and being a teacher like being almost a minister in one of the third world countries. However, to go into third world countries, teachers are being looked as, or being a teacher is the least job in the pyramid that a person can look at. Not good payments, not well prepared, and even community is. To the other side of the argument, we're saying, however, the power, the one who is controlling the class is a teacher. So how do we say the students or not, how do we say that the students and the community should take the blame, not the teachers? To me, both of the arguments are valid. Both of the arguments take place. It depends on the region, the geographical location, and I totally agree with them both.
Okay, let's move on. I don't think they're going to challenge each other up here. They're a very loyal group. So let's move on and try and get a little bit into this a little bit more. And here I'd like to ask each of you to kind of role play with me. That I'm the Minister of Education in your country. And it's not inconceivable that some of you will go home and the word of your travels and your experience will be out, and you may find yourself invited to the minister's office and say, what'd you do this year? And then after that it will be, okay, based on what you saw and all these wonderful people you got to meet, what one or two things do you think we should prioritize in education in our country? Okay? Now you look ready.
Okay, so I've been looking forward to this. Okay, so I think I'll tell him a couple of things. The first thing I'll say to him, which I think you'll be taking a little aback, is to relax on the use of technology. And I say this for different reasons. So attending the eLearning Africa conference, I don't know how many of you were there, but the lights even went off right in the middle of a plenary session. That shows that we're just not ready. I think they can focus on other areas, and the first area I'll advise that we focus on is the organization, the institution. Jeffrey Sachs wrote an article on institutions, and he talked about, well, poor institutions will always give you poor outcomes. So then if you're having a poor outcome or a poor education system, you should check your institutions. And if they're weak, then you shouldn't be surprised that you have such a poor education system. When I talk about the institutions, I'm talking about the organizational structure. So then the leadership of education in terms of who is creating the curriculum, who is checking out that the curriculum is being rolled out as it's supposed to be, who is making sure that teachers are in school, who is making sure that teachers are being adequately motivated, who is making sure that teachers who are teaching learners like us are actually qualified. I mean, would you take your child to a school where the teacher is not even qualified? I guess you might want to teach them by yourself. I mean, there are all of these checks and balances that must be put in place, and that comes from the organization, the organizational structure. Once that's fixed, once you have an institution that works, I think most of the problems that face education would fix themselves. I think the second one has to do with the role of media. I might sound a bit biased here because being a TV presenter for 18 months, it just shows you how much the media can play, the role of the media in enhancing education or trying to fix the problems of education. Because if you use the media to expose the problems, which is one side, but then again highlight what's working in other areas and how it can be replicated, then I think that we can move forward. So then if we're going to strengthen the institutions to start with, starting with Ghana, and use the media to try and get the message across, I think we can reach a wider community. We can definitely solve the problem of the teachers, and this is where Mohammed and I coined the term co-learners. So then we want our teachers to be co-learners because they can learn from us and we can learn from them, and I think that's definitely what I'll tell the Minister of Education.
Okay, so a little less emphasis on technology. Jawara is get focused on the teachers and bring some other partners into this and help us out, and that being the media.
Yes.
Okay.
So basically a collaboration between the institutions that work in terms of the organizations and the media. Yeah.
I'm going to bring you back in to tell me how to do that.
Okay.
Niwa.
As for me, I think I will tell the minister that it is important to raise the issue of bringing up the equivalency between formal and informal school in our education system now. I mean, we've been talking very much in many forums and conferences about this. However, it doesn't mean that we need to stop talking about this and trying to reevaluate how far we've been going with this. Because in many countries, I think, we've been having the problem of the mindset of the students or even the mindset of the family about the informal education has not been similar, has not been equal between formal and informal educational system. And that's why probably the government should enforce not only socialize publicly about what's the importance of the informal education, but also trying to engage the students and try to involve them and try to think how the informal education can change their life, and promoting the mindset of the students that informal education could be a very good way for them to be pursued.
Okay, thank you. You'll definitely be back in. I'm not sure I understand what to do with informal education.
Probably because I'm also working with my organization, and we've been dealing with social project and social entrepreneurship. And I have a friend named Iman Usman, which is the president of the organization right now, and he's making the curriculum for social entrepreneurship that is being undergoing now, and probably he can do proposing it into some educational institution in the future. And I think this is one of the way how we can integrate informal education into the more formal education that we have. So we need more social sensitivity in educational.
More synergy between the two, the two different.
Yeah, trying to learn each other and trying to incorporate probably.
Okay, let's go down to Miriam.
First of all, I will thank him, and I will suggest to him that he should provide a new academic plan. This new academic plan for unifying system, which is bring all schools together, unifying in one system. They have the same curriculum, the same exams. The schools should focusing about the national identity, providing the educational moral values for each school. Because nowadays we heard about the independent schools, and each school they have their own system, their own curriculum. So I think that's like kind of confusing for education. And so this is my suggestion to him, to make unifying a new education system for the country.
So more standardization. And how does that, I'm getting some other people telling me I should be decentralizing. How do I balance these two?
You mean for the
people are telling me that decentralizing, giving the schools more authority, and I think you're telling me I should.
No, not for like for the student. You have to discuss with them. When the make decision is not by student, within the student, you have to engage the student with the decision making.
Okay. And who did I? Jaro, did you speak?
No, not yet.
Who did I miss? Did I miss someone? Jaro, go ahead, Mohammed.
I have been raising my hand. I wanted to answer this question because it's rather funny and interesting to me. If the minister actually called me to ask about one or two pieces of advice to reform education, I'll tell him, sir, I'm sorry, I don't believe that's a way to reform or transform education. The matter of education, again, it's a matter of integration of a system together. You cannot take one part. Yes, we need teachers to be co-learners, mentors. We need to have our systematic school being done according to the needs of a geographical location, a country, a region. However, it cannot be work or done one here and forget about the others. It should be done one time. So there is no one piece plan that I can tell you, do that and it's going to change everything. So it needs time, it needs effort, and it should be done strategically, not just in one sentence.
So it should take more time, and it should be done, I think you're saying, more systemically?
Yes.
More holistically looking, it's not one or two things I can work
Exactly,
on.
It's not one or two things. It's not actually a conversation on a cafe that I sit with a friend and yes, what do you suggest? I would suggest one, two, and that. No, it's an educational system. It's an outcome. It's an interest of nation, not a propaganda of a country.
Okay, so I need to bring my curriculum people, my teacher people, my facilities people all in the room and talk this through.
True. Yes.
Yeah.
For me personally, if I got a call from the minister, I think what my advice would be to reclaim the production of our education. I think that when we talk about education, we either tend to limit it to a technological scope or what's happening within a classroom, but I think we need to create a culture of learning and societies that encourage learning all around. Education should transcend the classroom, and we should, within our societies, be creating the writers of the stories that our children will be reading. We should be writing our own textbooks. We should be reclaiming our own identity through our education. And I think that the mass production of education is what I would bring up. And I think that each region and each country should be empowered to take care of their education. And I think that this is a conversation that we need to have with one another, and I think it's something that you work with together, and you don't do this for one another. And I don't think the differences between like developing and developed nations are that big in this instance, because I think all the standardization of learning internationally is something that's great, but I think specificity is important, and that's what I would like to point out to the minister.
Good. Okay. Thank you. You'll all be invited back when we have a little more time. I want to switch and ask another question, which I think is an important question, and take you out of your countries this time. And you've had, as you finish your year as wise learners, and you've had these phenomenal experiences, what would you like to say to the professionals, many of us long-time professionals in education and education development that are gathered here at the summit, many of whom are international leaders whose influence spans not just one country or two countries, but whole regions, and some even the world. From your perspective as young learners and based on the experience of this past year, what, if anything, do you think we're missing in conferences like this? What aren't we talking about that we should be? What aren't we doing that we should be? What advice do you have for us? Let's start right in the middle again, Jaljara, if you're okay with that.
Sure. I think that we're all sort of waiting for a savior, and I think we all think we're going to come up with the next great solution, and I don't think there's going to be one person or one solution to solve the problems that we're facing. And I think that that's the thing that we need to point out, is that this should be a collaborative effort, and the theme this year is collaborating for change, and I think that that's something that should be happening, and it should be happening across the board between students and teachers and policymakers. Everyone should be working hand in hand towards this development.
Okay, so collaboration. Niwa?
I think it has been very insightful to come here and listening to many ideas about educational system. But I think quite many, sometimes we are lacking of emphasizing the issue of leadership attributes and social sensitivity of the learners, of the students, because we have been talking much or many times about the 21st century skills, like to be initiative, to be creative, thoughtful, and so on and so forth. However, how can we make collaboration to make a change? How can we make the people being aware each other and helpful in order to improve our education if our students today doesn't get the proper emphasis to be having this character, moral values, to be socially sensitive? So it should be something that we give more emphasis for me to talk about in our educational system.
Collaboration. But aren't we talking of, now you both mentioned collaboration, but that seems to be a pretty prominent part of the discussion here at WISE. So I'm going to come back to both of you, and you think on the question. I want to know what we're not talking about that you think we should be. Yeah.
On the sessions we had yesterday, we had education and culture, education and sports, education and another concept, learning. Yes, we need to study all of these apart, but where is the session that makes them all together to create education? That is on reality going on. It is all again spouse theory and versus action theory, or theory in action. We want to do that, we want to do that, but in reality it's all connected. It's not separated. It's not you cannot separate psychology of education from sports of education. You cannot separate curriculum or methods or process. Everything is integrated and everything is unified. But how do we take it? We don't take it as it is on reality. Okay. We have been hearing a lot about scaling up, sustainability. However, I came here last year, and today I'm through the second day, and I don't have a clear vision about it. Are we going to still talk about it for the coming 20 years? what is there? That's the advice, and it's a question to the expert or the mature learners.
So you want more on integration and alignment of all of these different ideas.
True. Yes.
Kind of a systemic systems thinking approach, I think, as you told me about already. Okay. Now.
I think we need to rethink our approach to these conferences, especially the WISE Summit. I think WISE is doing a fantastic job. I must congratulate Sheikha Mozart for her new initiative. That is what I'm expecting to see, some action. We've been talking, and that's all we do. When are we going to start walking the talk? And that's something we definitely, how do we measure the success, or, well, it might not be a success, or it could be a failure, but what are we measuring? How are we measuring what we are taking away from here? Are we taking anything away from here? We're talking about, last year we're talking about increasing access to education. How many of you seated here who came last year can actually say that you have done something to improve access to education in your communities, in your countries, and on the local level and the national level? Now we're talking about collaborating for change. How many of you have actually, we have exchanged business cards? Yeah, it's all part of the networking, is all part of the talking. How are we going to walk the talk? And that's the most important thing. It's easy to say it, but I think it's much harder to do it. And I had the opportunity to speak to Dr. Abdullah about it, and he mentioned that they could, thinking of doing, organizing little mini WISE in the different regions. And I think that's something worth applauding, because you should realize that there are different levels of countries or organizations represented here. There are those from developing countries and those from the developed countries. Well, my question is, how can you propose a solution that would work in a developed country for a developing country? I don't think it's going to be very implementable. I don't think it's going to be very successful. I think we need to have a more structured approach in terms of the innovations and the solutions that we propose here, that we need to be aware of the fact that what might work in a developed economy or a developed country might not necessarily work, or it might need some tweaking, or it might need some organizational structuring or change. So I think it all falls down to the approach and walk the talk.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Mariam?
Actually, there's two sentences I want to say. Listen to students. Always listen to the youth people, because I believe that they have like different views, different opinions than elder people. And imagine, Professor, that the voice learner should be heard in a high level, and broadly level, and the voice learner should be like a big things, like a WISE, while where the majority is the learners and the minority is the decision makers. So could that be happening? I believe that it will be.
Okay, Mariam, you wanted to respond to that?
I wanted to agree. I think everything she was saying sort of falls in line with, looking at the African region, because I don't think what goes on in the Asian region is too far off the African region. I think what would be nice would be to see an African spring, like the Arab Spring, and I think you could see some significant changes in that area.
Okay. Either Nira or Jawa, would you like to try again? And is there anything that came to mind? I think what you were saying was, what we're doing is good, the collaboration talk. That this is what's needed, and that we should be doing this. Is there anything we're not doing?
I think that while there is talk of collaboration, I still think that there's this view that helping out developing nations with their education is almost sort of an act of charity, not an act of collaboration. And I think that while the word collaboration is used, it's often working for rather than working with. And that's what I meant by, I think we should talk about collaboration more.
At a deeper level.
At a deeper level.
At a deeper level, okay. Niwa, you want to add anything?
I think I pretty much agree to that. We have to deepening the collaboration, not only focusing on making something new again and again and reinventing wheel. Maybe in a concrete way, I could say, for example, Sheikha Moza just recently launched the new initiative Educated Child. Then probably any organization or potential stakeholder here can do some partnership for sending, or even Wise Learners program can like initiate some kind of volunteering activities that could send some volunteers or young learners to go to Africa, for example, with this program, and trying to make collaboration on that.
Okay. And that's an interesting one, because if you went to the session this morning, we're not the only learners here at WISE. A young man stood up and made a suggestion that there should be a volunteer organization, or some kind of a international youth corps, depending on how you heard the question, to support the Educated Child Initiative. What do you think of that?
I think that's a brilliant idea, because it goes back to walking the talk. You're actually being practical. You're actually doing something. So then if you're volunteering, you're going down to the grassroots, you're going down to the field, and you're actually enacting a change that is measurable. And that's definitely a smart way to do things.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
If I'd say yes, I'm for it, and I'm willing to give 1 year or 6 months of my life to go to a country in Africa or in any place in the world to be a co-learner and a mentor.
Okay. And Mariam, you said you'd go.
Yeah, of course, because I'm a young, so I think like him. And as we young, we have energy, so we have to spend it in something related to the community, to help other people's, spending something important, something like developing the countries. So.
Okay. Good. We've just about come to the time. It's interesting to me, and actually, it's actually heartwarming to me. If you sit with these young people when you're not in the room, they're quite animated with each other, and they really work hard at challenging each other. What's heartwarming is the loyalty that you see in this group of young people. They're not going to argue in front of you, because the loyalty that they've developed amongst themselves in this past year bodes well, I think, for international cooperation and dialogue in the future. And I hope that's part of what we're building in the WISE Youth Leaders Initiative, Youth Initiative. We have a lot of questions coming in. I'm going to turn to all of you in just a moment. I'm going to take a couple of Twitter questions here first. The first one is, what are the best ways for teachers to collaborate with learners? I'm going to let that one go and use it as an opportunity to remind all of you that tomorrow there is a Learner's Voice Forum. And that is specifically the question that will be addressed in that forum at 1:30. The learners are going to host a forum where they're going to discuss what does it take to operationalize this idea of learner's voice at the university level, at a secondary level, at a primary school level. How do you operationalize this concept? So I'm going to let that one slide for the moment. With better teacher training and coaching, it is proven that quality teaching increases immensely. How can we support and value better the status of teachers? What's it going to take what are the ways we could value teachers and show them that we value them more? I think it's probably Jaberi.
Yeah, sure, I'll take that question. I think that we have to change the role of teachers in society. I think that they're very much undervalued. And I think when we talk about teacher development and training, I think that this has to be a local initiative as well. Because in a region like the Middle East, for example, we have a lot of teachers coming in from other countries that come in to teach things like English and science and math and all those things as well. But then we sort of lack an understanding of the cultural situation that they're kind of walking into. So you get a lot of comparisons, and I think that that's something that's really negatively affected education locally. So I think what we need to do is that we have to create a status where being a teacher is a job that people look forward to becoming and encourage their kids to be. And my mother was a teacher, and a lot of my aunts are professors at universities. But with a lot of my generation, we don't see the same aspiration towards being a teacher, because I think it's become something of a sort of secondary role, like those who can't do teach. We've all heard that saying, and I don't think that that's the right attitude to have, and I think that's something that needs to be completely eliminated from our understanding.
Okay. Anyone else? No?
Okay, so why do we value lawyers? Why do we value doctors? why do we value chemical engineers? That's because it takes a lot of work to go through. If you don't get your 3 A's at A-levels, you don't get into the top-end universities, you don't get into to do your master's, you don't get to do your PhD. I think we need to look at the model of Finland, where it's actually a tough job to go through the education system to become a teacher. It shouldn't be like what Al-Jahara said, or we need to rethink the way we address teachers, or we take teachers through the training level. For instance, in Ghana, you realize that a greater proportion of people who end up in the teacher training school are those who didn't get into university because they didn't have the best of grades. Well, why are we sending such people to come and teach? I think that's what, if we can attach more prestige or value to teachers, and that comes in terms of the qualifications they need to attain, and that would translate into valuing them or making them more important in society. And then you would know that before you can become a teacher, you need to go through process A, B, C, D, or make the process more rigid. Then that way you can attach more value to teachers.
Okay. Let's switch to the audience and take some questions from the audience. Our panelists. Number 2, we'll take number 2 right there. And then we'll take over here. Then we'll take number 1 and number 3. Okay, 2, 1, 3. Sir.
Good evening. My name is Vincenzo. I'm from Italy and I work in New York and for an NGO called AFS, and we provide exchange student organizations in many countries of the world. From what I understand, you started all your education in your own country, and then you completed your education in another country. And I'm sure you had to go through some, let's say, cultural issues, traveling and studying and completing your education in another country. So my question is, how do you value intercultural learning and adding the cultural aspects into the strictly academic issues you have gone through? Thank you.
Okay. So if I understand the question, it's when you move across cultures and you're getting part of your education in one culture and then another, what culture do you identify with? Is that the relationship between cultures?
What is the impact of the relationship between cultures on strictly academic learning?
Okay. Someone want to try that?
I can do
Al-Jawar?
Okay. From my personal experience, I actually was born here in Qatar, and I did most of my elementary education in Canada, and I moved back to Qatar for high school. So what I had was a sort of inverse relationship with my culture, because I left it for a long period of time and then came back to it. And I think that culture has the power to empower students, because when you go across a border, when you sort of enter into a new cultural dimension, what you end up doing is something that you wouldn't naturally do if you were born into that particular culture, and that's to ask why. Like, why do we do things the way we do? And why are certain things sort of the way that they are? And I think that sometimes when you're born into a particular culture, you're desensitized to that. And that's why I personally love diversity in schools, because you get asked questions that you wouldn't normally be asked by people that have had the exact same life experience as you. So I don't know if that answers your question completely, but that's just from my personal perspective.
Personally, until I was 17 years old, I was in Yemen. I did an exchange program as a senior in the U.S., went back to Yemen for 2 years, and now I'm in France. So I'm a product of 3 different educational systems. And moving from a country to another is not just about the academics of the system. It's not about, it's about an integration of, I'm using integration a lot today. It's about an integration of different aspects. Yes, as Al-Jawhara said, you get asked questions you never got asked before. You value you value your culture more than before, because you miss it first, because you see the differences. Living in one place means you are a person of one-dimensional look at life. Going to a different culture or being a product of different educational levels give you the multi-dimensional property of that.
Sorry, just to jump in on that. I don't think that if you're a product of one culture, you're necessarily one-dimensional. I think that it's just we should always encourage diversity and interacting with a multitude of people. I think that being a product of two different cultures or more than that, I think that's a privilege that you should look at as a privilege, and that's not something that everyone necessarily has the ability to do.
True. However, living, now we're going to debate. I like that. However, living in a world where globalization is rapidly going, yes, reserving identity is important. However, looking at the world from different perspective is necessary. Maybe I came from a country where other cultures were not as valued. I was not exposed to other opinions. Maybe in other cultures, yes, you may be exposed to different cultures or identities living in one geographical location, and that's, I believe, my personal experience.
I'm sorry, Jara, but I'll have to agree with Mohammed. I really think that the international experience is highly important because it really does expose you to the different cultures, the different ways of thinking, the different dimensions and perspectives out there. So using me as an example, so I studied in Ghana up until age 14, and then I did my GCSEs, my A-levels, and I took a gap year, so that was in the UK, and I came back to Ghana for university, which is a bit of a reverse because you do your primary, secondary education, and then you fly out to do your tertiary. But I did find a pretty good school in Ghana. But the point I'm trying to make here is that it makes you a more rounded person. Mind you, the world is becoming a smaller place. It's becoming a more global community. That's why we have so many different people from different countries and nationalities represented here today. And definitely, I'm really glad you brought about the culture, the issue of culture, because having a multidimensional cultural experience is highly, highly important, and it does contribute to your educational experience and your lifelong learning experience.
You can't let them gang up on you. Go ahead,
okay. Sorry, just to have the final word on this. By their description, the world is becoming an increasingly globalized place, so interaction with other cultures is, as you described, inevitable. So do we have one-dimensional people? I think it's very hard to not interact with other cultures. And I do think that the ability to travel internationally is a privilege. And I think that we all often undermine it because a lot of people do have that ability nowadays, but it's not an opportunity for everyone. And the world is globalized, so international cultures are coming to you, and you don't necessarily have to go to them.
Let's take another question. We'll come back. But before we take another question, I want to dispel the idea that all of our learners have had these multicultural, multi-country experiences. We have, I don't know the percentage, but maybe 25%, as many have. This is the first trip they've made out of their country. So not all the learners have quite that mixed background. We have a high percentage of them that are, for them, this is the first time they've been out of their country. I said I would go over here to number two. What happened? Number one. Okay.
Yeah, hi, my name is Tafik. I'm from France, studying in the UK. I'm actually a WISE learner 2012, so kind of like a younger brother of the panelists. My question is more regarding your experience as a WISE learner during the whole year. Looking back, are there things that you would have done differently to maybe achieve more than you've achieved? And also, I would like an answer on the question of how do you operationalize a learning voice? How can we operationalize the learner's voice on a larger scale? What does it mean? How can it be put in practice? Shall we listen to younger learners, older learners? How can it be made something practical?
We're going to save the second part until tomorrow. He's actually cheating. He's one of the leaders of the talk tomorrow. He's looking for some ideas, I think. He's hunting, because that's what we're going to do. That's what we're going to discuss tomorrow, is how do you operationalize this idea, okay? But what was the first half? The first half, I think, the first question was, what could you have done to get more out of this experience? What could you personally have done? Did you take everything you could have? Is there something you could have done differently to get more?
I think most of us...
there's 30 young people out there who would like to know this.
I think most of us made as much as we could out of the experience. Like, all of us were there for the Skype sessions, no matter what time it was and where we were on the face of the earth. We were always there for Skype sessions. We all attended conferences internationally or tried our best to. And even if we weren't there physically, we all participated in the research. There were more emails, I think, sent between us all year than there were by most people I know. Yeah. There was just threads of like 60 emails just going back and forth. So I think we all made sure our voice was heard through the program.
Okay. I'm going to take a couple questions now this time. So let's take 3, and then was there 4 somewhere? I thought there was take 3, and then we'll take number 2 here, and then 1 over here.
Hello, my name is Bahauddin. I'm a new voice learner. My question originates with what Ms. Mariam said. She said that we should come up with one national policy for education. But as we know that in anthropology, they say if you move just a short distance, like of 8 kilometers, that the cultural and language changes. So I would say, like even there are some nomadic people in Afghanistan and Maori people in New Zealand who even don't want to be educated. So I think that would it not be better if we come up with policies for different nationals, because we have to have some technical skills, like for people like these that I'm talking about. So I think a national policy would somehow not work in areas like these.
Okay, questioning whether national policy its time may be gone. And I want to just point out this young man comes to us from Peshawar in Afghanistan. He grew up in a refugee camp outside of Peshawar, and by the grace of God, he's a medical student at this time. Let's take the second question here. We'll come back. Hold that question. Questioning the national, challenging the national. Yes.
Thank you very much. My name is Robert from African Youth Movement, Nigeria. Very thrilled to see talented young people with good experience. The question is, most times when we are at the forefront and we are exposed, we tend to forget the limitations of people that we've left behind. So my question is, how do you intend to relate with people who have limitations, like the disabled people, the young people in different communities that are disabled? What connections do you have to them? How do you intend to support them, to be a voice for these people who are oftentimes forgotten? Thank you.
Okay, so how do we pull more people into the voice, I think is the question. And there was a third I said I would take, the third one.
Hi.
I want to point out, not only does this loyalty among learners happen within a cohort, apparently it happens across years because their colleagues from this year are jumping in here pretty aggressively. Yep.
I think Dr. Tom gave it away that I'm a wise learner as well. My name is Ahmed Al-Mira and I'm a Qatari student at Wal Quran Medical College. Now my question is addressed in relation to what Al-Jawhara said about creating a culture for education. Now it's all very well where countries where there is a history or an abundant history of education, such as America or the UK or Paris, France, or countries such as Qatar, which have the vast amount of resources to create a culture, have the ability to do so, and that's very beneficial. But how do you address countries which have neither the history nor the resources to create a culture of education? So how can you create that culture in those countries which actually need the education the most?
Okay. So we've got 3 questions. A challenge to the idea of a national system. We've got a suggestion or a question about how do we get more voices into this, and how do we create a culture of learning in places that some of the fundamentals are missing. So we'd like to take one of those. Mariam, which one would you like?
For the national
national,
yeah,
okay.
For the national system, the reason that I choose national system, because I don't think so that the universal system is working here in the Middle East or in your country. I will give you an example that from a month ago I was working as a teacher assistant in some of preschool, and when I came to these schools, so I found that the change of the education, the system of the education is changed from traditional to the new things. Definitely. So the teaching way is dependent on technology, on computer skills. So when I come to the toys, also the toys, and they become to use the imagination of the children to receive the information. So when I come to the class, I thought that I am in Disneyland, not in a class, because everywhere toys, and the children start playing everywhere. This is the American system or universal system. And when I try to teach them like grammar lessons, when I use the board, the teacher asked me, "No, this is the traditional way." I said, "Okay, come on. This is the sentence. How can I teach them? It is nouns and verbs. How can I teach them?" She said that you have to use toys. You have to use pictures to teach them. Come on. How can we teach them grammar? And finally, at the exam, the children cannot even handle the pencil and write. So this is the universal system. So I prefer to use national system, because the national system know the atmosphere, know the Middle East or in Qatar culture or language or education itself. So that's why I prefer national.
Okay. That question?
The same question. I believe Miriam is pro a classical way of learning, and personally, I don't find any way of using toys or new methods of learning in order to deliver or change the atmosphere or environment inside a classroom. However, to your question, sometimes inside the same country, you might find different cultures, and that happens. For example, in Morocco, not all of the people when we went to visit were Arabs. They don't speak Arabic. Others speak Berberian. So some of the reasons that students don't go to class, especially in primary education, was that their own language was not taught at classroom or at school. So basically, I don't understand why the way that we look at education from a fixed way. It should be flexible. It should go convenient for all of the needs inside a community. It is important to have all of the needs of community inside of the educational system.
I just want to disagree with the point about toys. I think that engaging students isn't just gone about in a traditional manner. I think that using things like iPads and toys can be used if they're used effectively and correctly. And going back from a national system, I think that when we're discussing from our personal experience in national system, when we're talking about Qatar, it's a much, much smaller country than what most people are referring to. So saying that a national system would work, we're talking about it probably in this particular case of Qatar. Whereas with countries that have issues with refugees or multiple cultures being in one classroom, then of course the decentralized system would be beneficial.
On this same question? Okay.
So when you talk about a national system, you need to also probably focus on the future or the goal of the education you're given to them. If it's based on a national system, then how are they able to fit in when they leave the shores of Qatar? Or how are they able to relate, or how they're able to compete even on the global market? I think that's something we need to look into.
Mariam?
I agree with you, Johara, but the things of the toys they have been using for whole week. So they have been using the toys and the computer skills. So I suggest that they have to use it in only one class in a week, so to improve their imagination, improve their skills as well. Not as all the week they have been using the toys and it's something.
Okay, let's take one of the other questions. Maybe I spoke too soon. Maybe they're going to get into it here, but let's take one of the other questions on the extending the learner's voice. Yeah.
Okay, so thanks very much for your question. That definitely brings me to a point that I've been talking about, being practical. So you're saying definitely we are the lucky few, the privileged few, have the opportunity to be here. And I think going home going back home in terms of we being learners, both 2012 and 2011 learners, I think what we need to do is to be more practical. We can go into our communities and volunteer. There are definitely homes for the disabled, there are schools for the disabled, there are autism schools, there are schools for socially disadvantaged, if I can cluster them all under that umbrella, the schools, different schools for socially disadvantaged. That is where we can make their voices heard, or we can, yes, that's the area where we can make their voices heard by going and sitting down with them, if it's an hour a week, or if it's 2-3 hours in a week, and actually teaching them, helping to empower them, helping to make their voices heard. And I think that's how we can reach them. Obviously, not everyone can have the opportunities that we are having or the experiences that we are having. So it's our duty to actually go back and take action, to walk the talk again, to dedicate an hour a week or 2 hours a week, depending on your schedule, and actually make that impact in your local community. And then you can advance to the regional, the national community or region. Thanks.
You want to jump in on that, Niwa?
Yeah, on the same question, I think it's going to be one of very important input as well for all of us, that we could really go volunteers, as Na said. We can take actual action towards sharing what we got here. But at the same time, maybe it should be seen as one of the concern for us, that in the future we can also engage them, or maybe encourage them to take part with the Western program as well. And for me, that we share the same commonalities between we all and the other people who have limitation or disabled or something like that, is the future, because we share the same future, that we need the hope to pursue our life. And this is one importance, that we need to involve them into some allocation of involvement, and trying to go to do volunteers and trying to inspire them as well.
Someone want to take the culture of learning question on?
I can take that question. I think that when we talk about creating a culture of learning, it's not just about traditional understandings of knowledge or teaching. I think that each society, all across the world, every civilization has had a mode of understanding or a mode of transmitting knowledge. So when we talk about the United States or Britain being great, locations for knowledge, but why not the rest of the world as well? Just because oral traditions are hard to track down, it doesn't mean that they're of any less value. So I don't think you can say that any society on earth has not had a sort of understanding of the importance of knowledge. I think it's just translating those sort of traditional ideas of what knowledge is, which areas of knowledge are important, and translating them into sort of more practical ways of communicating them to the rest of the society. And I think with that comes the idea that you're not just educating children in schools, you're also educating their parents, you're also educating the teachers that are then providing that education to them. And it's about making sure that everyone in the system is receiving the same sort of attention, and not just the children, and not just particular people.
To answer the question about culture of education culture, I agree with Al-Jawra. You don't need materialistic values in order to achieve such a goal. Yesterday, or during the 2 days ago, during the speakers' dinner, I was talking with one of the speakers from Kuwait, and she was talking how students are getting paid money in order to go to classrooms. Yesterday, the same issue was raised, that in Qatar as well, the government pays money to some of the students to go to schools as well. We see a materialistics, but we don't see incentive. Some of them say as well, we pay, but they're not interested. There is no passion. They don't find what interests them. So it is not about materials here. It's about increasing the value and importance of education as a necessity of life.
Okay, let's take a few more questions. Number one, and number three, okay? Number one and number three, and then number two. Okay, 1, 3, and 2.
Thank you. My name is Untitled Chapter from Uganda, and I just wanted to address two aspects very shortly. One is there is a lot of talk, as she said. But when it comes to the action, especially to the issue like, say, teachers, all around the sessions we've been noticing that there are no teachers, we don't have enough teachers, or there is not quality teaching. But what is going to happen in Africa, for example, about the teachers? When are we going to have the teachers that we need? Shall teachers ever be enough? I'm looking at solutions like, what are the alternatives? Because we're not going to wait for all governments in Africa where the education is not good for them to invest for teachers to be there. We shall wait another 20 years. Then after the teachers are there, we identify another issue. So what I'm suggesting and what I'm thinking is, what are the alternatives? If a teacher is in one place, can she be in many places at the same time? For example, if a teacher is in Qatar, can she teach students in Uganda using technology? So I'm looking at what ways can we harness to bring solutions to the issues we have rather than the conventional means of train more teachers. Okay. 2, the aspect of technology that she mentioned. That, for me, is a bad idea. We need technology. It is one of the reasons as to why we are behind. And if you look at that, I'm looking at how many teachers can be in one place at the same time, and you say we relax on technology. That cannot be made possible without technology. We need technology. We just need to figure out how it can help us to get better. Yeah, that's my contribution.
Okay. So questioning, I think, narrow your position on technology. Hold on to that. And I said I would go over to, I forget now, I said 1, what was the next 2?
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. My name is Iman Al-Muhannadi. I'm working in the Supreme Council of Education as a science specialist. I totally understand what Maryam Al-Kuwari faced on that day that she visited the school. I don't know if everybody here in the hall heard about the new era of education in Qatar and how was the transition from, I don't want to say the traditional way because it was the way of teaching in Qatar. And there was a new era of education based on the curriculum standards that's created for Qatar. And the way of teaching is totally different. What Maryam faces because she was in the schools in the past year, but the new era of education is the correct way. Because it based on the new methodology should be, the information should be given to the students. It's based on the skills of the students, the toys that are given to the students, because it's early childhood, the students should be learned by doing. So the new era is excellent. What we need actually to do, and my message to the minister instead of you, Maryam, is that we need to sit and review what happened and what we give the schools, and then we can move on in the new steps. So reviewing what we are doing, what is here in Qatar, the inputs are excellent, but we need to review what we have done. Thank you.
Thank you. Miriam, I think I think that was an invitation. Okay. And the third?
My name is Martha Kimweri, a learner of Voice 2011 from Tanzania. And my question is based on the system of education. And the point is, now the education system is constructed in a way that most people, or like students who are good in subjects like mathematics, English, are the ones who are considered to be potential in their studies. And the system of education is constructed in a way that to only provide a working class to fit in certain organizations. But how can we have a system that ensures that students with other potentials, like students who want to do arts, music, and other who have other skills in learning are also considered to move forward with their studies.
Would like to take one of those questions on. And which one you want, Miriam? Which one are you responding to? Talking about Qatar and the change. And I think what she's saying is we need assessment, we need review, we need.
I know.
And she's inviting you to come and be part of that, I think.
Yeah, for sure. But I have a comment that the reason that I have been teaching in the preschool, because my project in WISE, it's about the challenging facing the early childhood education. So when I have been searching and Googling, I have been finding many of challenging that facing the early childhood education. But one of the professors said to me, did Qatar face some challenges in early childhood education? I said, of course not. He said, are you sure? I said, yes. Qatar are providing everything for the children. So he said, look after it. So in order to find the right answer, we have to do two things, which is the field experience and observation. So I went to that school. I watched, everything is perfect, the system is okay, but the reason is, the problem here, the teacher are not be able to apply the system in the right way. Maybe that reason. Or the system is wrong. So even the system or the teachers are applying the system in the wrong way.
Okay. And I'm sorry, we're going to have to let you jump on someone coming off stage for the other two questions because I've been axed. But before we go, I hope that what you've seen is what I mentioned at the beginning, that this is a really amazing group of young people thinking about issues years before many of us in the room were thinking about these issues in this way, which is why I come away optimistic that they're wrestling with these issues. And they're beginning to wrestle with both the ideal and the practical, which is really where we have to meet at a very young age. I want to thank you on behalf of them, those of you who have willingly met with them as they've accosted you in the halls and graciously accepted their invitations to be interviewed. I sincerely hope that you will take the time in the next day and a half to approach a learner, stop by the learner's booth office or desk there and engage with one or more of these learners. Ask them about their projects. Some of them are looking for jobs, if that's in your thing. And I assure you that their conversations you have with them will be the highlight of your WISE experience here and leave you hopeful for education in the future. I mentioned that tomorrow afternoon at 1:30 there is a learner-led discussion about the 2 or 3 of the questions that were asked, which is really an important question. How do you operationalize learner's voice? Does learner's voice mean learners are going to lead the system in the future? And what does it look like at the different levels of education? And where do learners fit in the national debate? And how do they get into that debate? So that's really the session tomorrow. It's a forum session or a moduli session down the hall. And before we go, I'd like to invite you with me to applaud our panelists. And thank you very much for being with us. Okay. Very nice job. Huh?